They left behind no faces, no voices, no cities carved in stone. And yet in the depths of Eurasia, the ghosts of the Denisovans still walk among us. In 2008, deep in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, a team of archaeologists stumbled upon a bone. It was small, just a sliver of a child's pinky finger buried in Denisova cave. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. But inside that fragment was a secret that would rewrite everything we thought we knew about human evolution. This was not Neanderthal, not Homo sapiens, it was something else. The DNA extracted from that ancient finger shocked the scientific world. It belonged to a previously unknown species of hominin, one that had lived, thrived, and vanished without leaving a single face in the fossil record. They were named after the cave that revealed them. Denisovans. And they were giants, not in myth but in bone. Their molars were massive, twice the size of modern teeth. Their fingers were thick and robust. Some jaw fragments suggest faces as broad as helmets, and skeletons towering over both sapiens and Neanderthals. The Denisovans weren't just another hominin, they were a force. But who were they? What did they look like? How far did they roam? For years, Denisovans were a ghost species known only through fragments and the mysterious traces they left in our genes. But now the fog is lifting. From the highlands of Tibet to the caves of France and Spain, scientists are uncovering new evidence that Denisovans may have reached deeper into Europe than we ever imagined. This is their story, a story not told in words or monuments, but in shadows, genes, and shattered bones. In modern Europe, up to 5% of the genome of certain populations contains fragments of Denisovan DNA. How did it get there? These people never set foot in Siberia, and yet their blood sings with echoes of a vanished people. The answer lies in a forgotten collision tens of thousands of years ago, when Denisovans, Neanderthals, and Homo sapiens all roamed the same earth. Their paths didn't just cross, they intertwined. Denisovan blood mingled with Neanderthals in the plains of Central Asia. Neanderthals met sapiens in Europe. And somewhere in that ancient triangle of contact, the Denisovan legacy bled westward. A tooth found in the Grotte Mandrin in France, once attributed to Neanderthal, now bears markers that suggest Denisovan influence. A genetic signature in the Basque people carries anomalies unexplained by standard human ancestry. Deep in a Spanish cave, a jawbone bears traits too robust for either Homo sapiens or classic Neanderthals. These are not proof, but they are questions. And questions are the fire that drives the hunt. What we know is this: the Denisovans were not confined to Siberia. They left genetic fingerprints in Australia, Melanesia, East Asia, and perhaps Western Europe. They may have been the true giants of the Ice Age, physically larger, mentally equal, and culturally mysterious. While Homo sapiens painted on cave walls and Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers, the Denisovans left behind silence, but not emptiness. At high altitudes in the Tibetan plateau, a child's jawbone dated over 160,000 years was found. It was Denisovan. The air there is thin, deadly. Yet the Denisovans adapted. They carried genetic mutations that allowed them to survive in conditions fatal to others. Today, that same mutation is found in modern Sherpas people who carry Denisovan blood. So if they could survive there, why not in the Alps, in the Pyrenees, in the frozen heart of Europe? Some researchers believe they did, and not just survive, thrive. The Denisovans may have built shelters of mammoth bone, crafted tools more advanced than those of the Neanderthal. They may have had language, music, and myth, but they left no temples, no graves, no named kings. They left only what nature preserves: bones, teeth, and whispers, and perhaps giants. In Indonesian caves, the hobbits of Flores, tiny human relatives, stood only 3 feet tall. But in the myths of Papua New Guinea, there are stories of people so large they crushed trees underfoot. In Basque country, tales speak of Gentilak, ancient giants who hurled stones and vanished when the first churches rose. Are these just fairy tales? Or are they fragmented memories, cultural fossils of a time when the world was shared with another kind of human, a stronger kind, a quieter kind, a kind that vanished. Perhaps the Denisovans didn't disappear. Perhaps they were absorbed, their legacy hidden not in bones but in blood, in you, in me, in the genes that make our bodies strong, our lungs deep, our lives long. We look to the stars for aliens, but the strangest creatures we've ever encountered were us, lost giants, forgotten cousins, the Denisovans. Their story is not over. It is buried in limestone, in legends, and in the mirror. They walked among titans, the glaciers that carved valleys, the beasts that shook the earth. Mammoths, cave bears, saber-toothed predators, and the Denisovans. Not just surviving, but enduring. Not just enduring, but shaping the genetic future of humankind. Their tools were simple yet effective, crafted from flint bone and ivory. But scattered among the stone debris, archaeologists have found anomalies, beads made of ostrich eggshell pendants carved from animal teeth, polished fragments that may have adorned their bodies. These were not brute survivors. These were people with a sense of self, of beauty, perhaps even of ceremony. In the dark, icy silence of prehistory, the Denisovans lit no torches on cave walls, but they carved their legacy deeper into bloodlines. They didn't build cathedrals, but they left behind maps inside our very cells. In Southeast Asia, some populations carry up to 6% Denisovan DNA. In parts of East Asia, traces remain in immune system genes, suggesting that Denisovan blood helped modern humans fight ancient diseases. Even in Europe, long thought too distant from their Siberian origins, strange patterns emerge. Fragments in the genomes of Basques, Sardinians, even Eastern Europeans show mysterious mismatches that don't align with either Neanderthal or sapiens ancestry. Some of these fragments are linked to traits of height, lung capacity, and bone density. Traits the Denisovans would have needed, and the timeline tells its own tale. As recently as 40,000 years ago, Europe was a patchwork of hominin frontiers. Denisovans to the east, Neanderthals entrenched in the west, Homo sapiens advancing northward from Africa through the Levant. These worlds did not remain separate. They collided. They bled together. They made children. A bone found in the Denisova cave, a femur of a teenage girl, contains half Neanderthal, half Denisovan DNA. A direct hybrid, one parent from each people. That child is the Rosetta Stone of interbreeding. The proof that these worlds overlapped not in war, but in the quiet violence of intimacy. So then ask yourself, if such a child lived in Siberia, how many more were born in the shadows of Europe? What if Denisovans walked further west than we ever expected? What if they stood on the mountains of Bavaria, drank from the rivers of Gaul, and watched the sun rise over what would one day be London? And what if the stories of giants, trolls, ogres, the terrifying but familiar shapes of folklore are not inventions, but echoes of real beings, too large to forget, too strange to understand, too human to fear? We buried them in myth, because the truth was too uncomfortable. Today, teams of geneticists, paleontologists, and linguists are working to stitch the Denisovan puzzle together. But it's a puzzle made of dust, of partial genes and splintered teeth. There is no full skull, no preserved skeleton, no carved language or burial mound, no Denisovan Venus, no flute. They are defined by what is missing, and yet that absence speaks volumes. It tells us that history is not a line but a tangle, that our ancestors were not singular but plural, that human has always meant many. There were more kinds of us, some with broader jaws, some with different songs, some with thicker bones and deeper silences, and we lost them, not all at once, not in flames or war, but slowly, quietly. As glaciers melted and forests spread and Homo sapiens spread further faster, adapting and overtaking, absorbing and forgetting. What remained of Denisova? A gene, a finger, a rumor. Yet in their vanishing, the Denisovans became more than people. They became myth. And myth, unlike bones, does not decay. We find them in the shadow of mountains, in stories of builders no one remembers, in fairy tales about strangers who once taught humankind how to shape stone. And maybe that's the legacy the Denisovans left us, not just blood, but awe. A reminder that we were never alone, that others walked beside us, equal, different, forgotten, but never truly gone. Because every breath we take on a mountaintop, every beat of a Sherpa's heart in thin air, every immune cell that fights an ancient virus, we owe in part to them. They were never just a footnote, they were a chapter just beginning to be read. And perhaps when we finally find their full skeleton buried somewhere beneath the loam of Europe, locked in limestone, waiting to be seen, the world will shift again. And we will look at the mirror not as Homo sapiens, but as what we truly are, hybrids, heirs, witnesses of the lost giants. Somewhere beneath the vineyards of southern France, under the roots of ancient olive trees, or deep inside an unexplored cavern in the Alps, the rest of them may sleep still. Entire skeletons, skulls, tools, memories set in stone, waiting for the earth to shift, for time to loosen its grip. And when we find them, if we find them, what will we learn? That the Denisovans were not only bigger, but smarter. That their brains encased in those massive skulls held a different kind of intelligence, less abstract, more tactile. That they could read the stars in snow, measure the passing of seasons by the wind through narrow passes. Or perhaps we will discover that they too made music. That inside one cave, a bird-bone flute still waits to be heard. But even if we find none of that, we already know one truth: their story lives in us. And in the silent power of what they survived. They survived ice, they survived altitude, they survived extinction, until they didn't. Not because they were weaker, but because the world changed, and perhaps so did we. Their genes helped shape our lungs, our bones, even our skin. That adaptation wasn't passed on by fluke, it was preserved through necessity. In high places, Denisovan DNA became the difference between life and death. And because of that, their legacy was folded into ours, not erased, just absorbed. The Denisovans did not disappear. They dissolved. And like a glacier melting into a stream, their shape may be gone, but their water still flows through our veins. We search for faces, for statues and altars and declarations carved into marble, but the Denisovans tell a different kind of story, one written not in monument, but in molecule. It is humbling to realize that the things that built us may never have spoken a word, that some of our greatest debts are owed to ghosts without names. They remind us that progress is not a ladder, but a web, that human evolution is not the triumph of one over many, but the fusion of many into one. And what does that say about us? That we are not the chosen species. We are the surviving combination, the children of sapiens and Neanderthals and Denisovans, of fire and ice, of blood and silence. The ancient world was never empty. It was crowded with minds. And as we walk forward into the future with our satellites and synapses, our machines and maps, we carry them with us. Not just in DNA, but in the very fact of our being. We are the echo of their last breath, and the answer to their greatest question: would we live on? Yes, but not alone. In recent years, artificial intelligence and quantum computing have allowed scientists to reconstruct partial Denisovan proteins. Algorithms try to guess what their noses looked like, how their vocal tracts worked, what their lungs could hold. But all of it is speculation, simulation, because what we truly lack is the soul behind the bone. Who mourned the Denisovans when they passed? Who was the last of their kind to watch the sunset and know they were alone? Perhaps it was a mother, or a warrior, or a child. Maybe that child wandered from the east alone, crossing the lowlands, the forests, the great rivers, heading west in search of others. And maybe one day, in what is now Spain, or Portugal, or Wales, that child met a small band of Neanderthals, and she was taken in. Her genes were carried forward. And though her name was never carved, her eyes still live in someone somewhere today. If you've ever stood on a mountaintop and felt as though you belonged to something older, if your heart beat differently in thin air or your skin burned more slowly in the sun, you may be hearing them. The lost giants. Your kin. The ones we forgot, but who never truly left. They are not gone. They are within us. We often speak of extinction as an end, but what if extinction is just a transformation too large for us to comprehend? The Denisovans didn't vanish in a single blaze. There was no epic battle, no cataclysmic fall. Instead, they faded, slowly absorbed into the very species that would one day forget their name. We know this now, not from stories or scrolls, but from sequencing. Each generation of genetic research pulls their outline further into focus. What was once a shadowy ghost lineage now stands as a third branch on the family tree of humanity, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about our singular rise. Denisovans were not the exception. They were the rule. For 300,000 years or more, the Earth was home to multiple human species, all walking, hunting, building, and mating side by side. It wasn't just sapiens. It wasn't just Neanderthals. It was also them. These are not alien creatures from an ancient past. They are people. People who raised children, who bled when cut, who loved, who feared, who looked at the moon and wondered. And then they were gone, but not erased, because their genes still breathe in the lungs of Tibetans and Melanesians, in the quiet strength of Andaman Islanders, and maybe in isolated European lineages still unexplained by Neanderthal introgression alone. It is possible, no likely, that their remains have already been found in Western Europe, mistaken for Neanderthals due to bone structure and shelved unnamed in dusty museum drawers. How many ancient jaws have we mislabeled? How many skull fragments have we filed under the wrong name? Science moves slowly, but it moves. And the moment is coming. The moment when a single fragment, one more sliver of rib or tooth, will match the Denisovan genome not in Asia but in Europe. And the map will shift again. Imagine the implications. Denisovans may have reached into Iberia, into Britain, into the heart of Gaul. They may have hunted reindeer under the auroras of the Ice Age sky, watched Neanderthals from afar, or interbred with early Homo sapiens long before our myths began. Perhaps they were the source of stories, of the green men of Celtic lore, of the forest giants of Basque legend, of the hidden folk of Alpine superstition. Not fiction, but memory. Distorted across millennia, twisted by firelight and famine and fear until a once-living people became monsters, myths. And finally, whispers. It would not be the first time science confirmed what myth has long remembered. Once we thought dragons were fantasy until fossils of massive reptiles were found. We thought the kraken was sailors' madness until we found the giant squid. And perhaps one day soon we'll confirm what the oldest mountain tales have always said, that giants once walked here, not with clubs and roars, but with quiet feet, deep eyes, and a strength born from the cold. The world they lived in is gone now. The glaciers retreated, the mammoths died. The silence fell. And yet under the soil of Europe, under churchyards and sheep fields and highways, pieces of their story wait. We must listen. Because the Denisovans are not just a puzzle to solve. They are a reminder that human history is not a crown passed from hand to hand, but a mosaic shattered, scattered, and still incomplete. That we are not the summit, we are the survivors. That every story ever told about the others may be in some way about us. We carry them not as burden, but as proof. Proof that strength wears many shapes, that silence can echo louder than words, and that the forgotten are never truly lost. So long as someone remembers. We dig because we remember. We sequence genomes because we hope. We reconstruct faces from splinters of bone because deep down we cannot bear the idea that they vanished without being seen. And so the artists sketch the software models the scanners hum. A brow emerges heavier than ours. A jaw square and formidable. Eyes set deep, perhaps amber, perhaps gray. Not monstrous, not alien, just unfamiliar. And yet in those reconstructions we see something that chills the spine, a person. Not a creature. Not a relic. A person who might have walked past you on a crowded street and made you pause not because of how strange they looked, but because something about them felt ancient. It's easy to mythologize, to paint them as giants with primal grunts and tree-trunk arms, but the truth is more powerful. The Denisovans may have been quiet. They may have lived in small bands, moved with the seasons, adapted rather than dominated. They did not leave pyramids, but they left resilience. They were survivors, high-altitude climbers, gene swappers, world crossers, and for a time longer than Homo sapiens have yet existed, they thrived. What then ended them? Perhaps the warming of the climate, perhaps the spread of sapiens. Perhaps they simply dwindled each generation more diluted into others until there were none left who bore the name. But what they passed on the oxygen processing genes, the immune traits, the silence remains. Even in our myths we feel them. Stories of the people before the people. The ones who built mounds-shaped stones vanished into fog. The strangers who knew the mountains better than anyone, who could walk barefoot across snow, who never lit fires, who spoke to the earth. Always silent, always watching, gone, but not quite. What are these stories but the last fossil of memory? We are used to thinking of history as a ladder. Each rung a triumph, each step a replacement. But the Denisovans tell us something else. That history is a river, forked, merging, splitting again, carrying sediments of everyone who ever lived. We are not the final rung, we are the floodplain, a convergence of all that came before. Of sapiens, yes, but also of Neanderthal and Denisovan. Their strengths lie within our weaknesses. Their memories echo through our dreams. Perhaps in the mountains, you've felt it a sudden, knowing, a deep recognition in a place you've never been. That's them. Perhaps in your blood something stirs when the air thins and the sky opens wider than it should. That's them, not ghosts, not gods, just family. And so we return to the question, what is a Denisovan? Not a monster, not a footnote, a person with skin warmed by firelight, breath turning to mist in the mountain cold. A person who laughed, who held hands, who buried their dead, or didn't. A person who changed the world by surviving just long enough to touch the future. They do not ask us to mourn them, they ask only to be known. And now they are, from the depths of Siberia to the peaks of Tibet, from the blood of Melanesians to the bones beneath forgotten European soil, their story grows louder. And the time has come to listen, to remember the lost giants, not as legend, but as kin. The final fragments are falling into place, not just in the labs of Oxford or the dig sites of Denisova, but in the minds of everyone who's ever wondered, where do we come from? Who were the others? What was lost in the making of us? Because there is no singular us. We were not born pure. We were shaped, stitched together by encounter, survival, and shared blood. To speak of Homo sapiens is to speak of Neanderthals. To speak of Neanderthals is to whisper the name of Denisovans. And to speak of Denisovans is to enter a silence older than language, older than myth, deeper than bone. They are the hum beneath our history, the unseen thread in our lineage, the missing chapter that was never missing, just unread. Soon we may find more. A full skeleton, a preserved settlement, an artifact unmistakably theirs, a face, and when we do it will not be a revelation. It will be a recognition. The lost giants are not truly lost. They are waiting beneath our feet, behind our breath, inside our blood. In every mountain path carved before maps, in every adaptation science cannot fully explain, in every human story too old for parchment. They are the ancestors we forgot to name, the teachers who left no books, the protectors who vanished into our veins. Not vanished, transformed. In the soft tissue of our lungs, they whisper to us how to breathe. In the ancient scripts of our immune systems, they remind us how to fight. In the mystery of our being, they ask us not for grief, but for memory. So let us remember, not just what they gave us, but who they were. Not monsters, not myths, not missing. Denisovans, the giants who did not fall, they became us.